It's like, yeah, like embrace it, man. You're starting the journey where you're at. It's so awesome where you're gonna wander, where you're gonna go. Like it's great. You don't need to be there yet though. You're here now, you know? You just yeah, go that way for sure. Like that's the way you want to go. But like, you know, you're here now. This is where you're at right now. And the more that you just own that and let that be, the easier a lot of this stuff's gonna become, right? The more of a flow you're gonna just find in the whole thing.
This is Way of the Artist with Brandon Colby Cook and Evan Schulte, identifying your blocks and demystifying your struggles so that you can claim your own path and make your life a work of art.
Hey everybody, just a quick public service announcement. The following episode unfortunately experienced a few technical issues with some remote recording stuff that came up that we can't really do very much about. We've cleaned it up as best as possible. The episode's still fairly listenable, but just so you know that this episode has a couple of audio glitches, I suppose. So we apologize for that, and hopefully you enjoy the conversation we had because it was definitely a good one. All right, that's it.
Welcome to the show, people. Welcome to the show. All right, we're doing a artist wisdom series. I love these, Evan. They're so fun. They're always interesting. They always seem to somehow relate to something that I find I'm going through in the moment anyway. So to me, it's just a creative way to talk about what I'm going to talk about anyway, but with some wisdom behind it, maybe to be incorporated. So the quote here, if you're interested, people, is anything more than the truth would be too much. And this is a quote by Robert Frost. Thanks to Evan, who brought this one in today for show and tell. And yeah, let's get into it, man. What about this one called out to you today?
Well, I think it was just based on some of the things you were saying to me, and it made me think of some other things that I've learned from other people, and particularly within acting as well. So there might be some other quotes that come through today to fill in on this one, but yeah, there's this. I think there was something about. There's something about this idea of trusting our efforts, and meeting the moment for what it is, for what it actually is, for being present. And I think that something that you had said was, like arriving to the needs of the moment or something like that, which is, I think, we were talking a little bit about, I guess, systems to a certain extent. We maybe didn't use that word, but, very often I think that we try to show up to situations with everything pre-planned. And so often it's just that can destroy you just as much as it can benefit you, because you when you're incapable of meeting the moment for what is actually required, you might not actually show up with what's actually with what you actually need.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Something, I'm trying to remember what it was that you were talking about specifically. It was like, sometimes you've got to, yeah, you were talking about how, like, sometimes, when we have fear, when fears come up or something, we, sometimes you've got to be gentle with yourself. Sometimes you've got to give yourself space, right? And other times you just got to dive into it, right? And it's not there'll be people who will say like, no, you just got to do it this way and this way and this way. And it's like, well, their wisdom is knowing which one to use, right, at any moment, because one thing might not be appropriate in one situation for another. And so anyhow, it was all of that part of this sort of conversation that we were having beforehand that made me think about this sort of particular phrase. There's one from my acting teacher, which we'll probably bring up at some point, but and it made me think of this one. And what I love about quotes is that, sometimes, I have an idea, or you have an idea, or we have an idea, and you can point to something and say like, hey, it's not just us talking about this. There's some pretty notable figures and people who have touched on this. And in this case, the great, probably one of the most quoted, most known poets in history, Robert Frost, right? Anything more than the truth would be too much. And I think that has a lot to do with how we meet the present moment, and how the way that we approach our lives, the way that we do things in our lives. I think that there's such extraordinary implications and wisdom to these. Like, I mean, how many words is that, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. In those 9 words, there's a lot that we can draw from it. So I'm excited to dive into this and see where it goes.
Yeah, me too, man. This is I'm thinking about it as you're talking. Anything more than the truth would be too much. I feel like this has been a little bit of a kind of a topic we've been covering over the last few episodes. I feel like we always kind of bleed into the next one, and there's something connected about it. And as I was re-listening to one of our past episodes and just getting it uploaded, I like to like re-listen to it and go through it. And there was a point where I was talking about dating, and I was thinking, as you were talking now, I was like, well, this relates to dating. It's all connected. It's all like the same thing, but it's like anything more than the truth would be too much. And I was thinking about, for going up and talking to somebody, and I mean, it doesn't even have to be dating. It could just be meeting somebody who you want to be a friend, right? Like, it doesn't have to, you don't have to put it in that context, but anything more than the truth would be too much tells me it's like in the moment when you go and approach this person, you have to acknowledge the truth of whatever that might be. And there's sometimes you're going to approach somebody and you can, if you're paying attention, you can see, well, this person isn't too open right now. And you can be mindful of that. And you can actually respond in a way, or even if you're still committed to connecting with them, and just be like, hey, like, look, I want to disturb you, like, whatever, but I just felt like I needed to come up and say hi and whatever. Or you say hi to them and then you kind of get back this, maybe a more negative response, something you weren't hoping for. The truth is that's what happened, right? You got this response that wasn't warm or welcoming. And so you need to respond to that. You need to accept that happened. That's a truth, right? And anything more than that, anything other than that, it's just too much. It's not going to work. It's not going to land. And I feel like, to further this conversation, just I find this to be so true with the way that I do art and the way that I motivate myself to do my goals and my dreams, and not just art related. But when we were talking about beforehand, something that my like system, my approach to doing a lot of things in life is always throw yourself into it, go for it. It doesn't matter. That's kind of been my approach, but I'm finding that it doesn't always work. It works a lot of the time. It's a great, like, blunt instrument, kind of just like power through, do it. But sometimes it just does not work. It's not the right approach. And there's no amount of force that I can apply to get through something. And so something I've been learning is that I have to adapt my strategy when it comes to fear and resistance. And instead of being like, just jump in and do it, I have to be kind to myself and I have to be like, it's okay. You're feeling resistance. You're feeling scared. Like, what's going on? You know, and what can we do to mitigate this feeling you're having? And this is me talking to myself. This is me working that out, as opposed to just being like, just do it. Don't be a wimp. Like, it's okay. You feel this right now. It's okay that that's going on. You know, I know you don't want to feel this, but why are you feeling it? And trying to almost talking to like a little kid and like helping that little kid like work that out, you know? And if it's funny because one last thing I'll just say about this is when you think about how you deal with somebody you love versus how you deal with yourself can sometimes be very different. Because I realize I don't treat myself with all the most love all the time. But if it was like a little kid, I would give them so much grace. Like, why don't I give myself a little grace? Why don't I do that? You know, maybe that approach is a little more truthful to where I'm really at, you know? Maybe I am like a little kid sometimes, and maybe I need to treat myself a little bit kinder that way so that I have the encouragement to do the thing that I say I want to do. So, you know, and that might be more true in the moment than say the guy that's like, you're a man, like force yourself, be a soldier, be a warrior, whatever, right? Like that kind of attitude. Whereas like maybe in truth, sometimes I'm just not a warrior and I'm not a soldier that day. And I'm not gonna be. And that's not gonna work for me. And you know, and maybe there's a time and a place for that for some people who are maybe too soft on themselves. Maybe they need to toughen up in some moments, just be like, just go for it and see what's possible. But anyway, this is something that's coming up for me in this conversation. I mean, it's interesting because I think that led to it. But so, well, what are your thoughts on that approach? Because I think that's what you were referring to when you called it systems. Or am I mistaken?
Yeah, no, I think it's like, yeah, like by systems, I kind of mean like, you know, coming in with these sort of ideas of like one size fits all, like ideas, which you know, I think that for many of us, it's the temptation, you know, like you want to just have everything figured out before you move forward with something. But, you know, very often it's just like that can become problematic as well. You know, it's not to say that I think that preparation is absolutely an important aspect of, you know, being a what you might call a professional in any field, but you've always got to know that there's this element of anything can happen, you know, which is one of the things I love. One of the things that I love about acting, and that which is amazing that so many actors don't actually realize this, and it's one of the things I first always try to stress to actors who come and start working with me is that understand that your job as an actor is fundamentally an improvisation. Like it comes down, like when it comes down to what you're actually doing, to performance, it comes down to a moment to moment, open, sensitive, vulnerable response to what is happening right in front of you. I don't give a shit what you planned or thought in your head, you know, last night before you showed up today. Like that's all good. Like there's work that you do. You're understanding the story. You're understanding, you know, the themes. You're understanding, you know, parts about who this person is. That I'm not saying anything against that. But what I'm saying is that like fundamentally, you've got like your job is an improvisation. Like it comes down to a listening thing. And I think that there's something that we can glean from that within, you know, all areas of our lives, which is just like, yeah, you can prepare, you can plan and all of these things, but then you've always got to meet the moment for where it's at. And it's interesting because like I do want to get into some other aspects, but I think this does have a lot to do with you know, this quote that we're taking on, right? Like this, because I think that over prepping and over planning can be, and that control it can be an aspect of actually trying to bring more than the truth, right? Like, and it's definitely within, again, I'll use acting because, I know it, and it's it's an easy place for me to describe this, but and it's something that's been identified a long time ago, like and probably even before Stanislavski, but Stanislavski's like kind of the oldest person that I know of who said this, but he used to refer to this thing that actors do as a little plus, the little plus, and he would always be on his actors to be just like, basically cut that shit out, like get the little plus out of your acting, out of your performance, right? And he was speaking to the same thing, like, I want you to be truthful, I want you to be honest, I only want real human behavior and response up on stage. But actors have this whole thing of like, no, well, I've got to put a little something else into it, right? I've got to make it more showy, I've got to make it more interesting, I've got to, we don't trust that the truth is enough. Just the simple truth of something is enough. So there's this desire to like, oh, I've got to make it more, and so often it just fucking ruins it. Right? Because and audiences are pretty smart, to a large degree with acting to in many extents, where it's like audiences can smell when there's bullshit, where it's just like, hey, like that was, and even if someone doesn't have a super strong sort of eye for it, most people can recognize something like, the difference between, just an okay actor and like a Philip Seymour Hoffman, like, or it'd be like, whoa, yeah, that whatever that person is doing is incredible, right? Like, versus someone who's just kind of doing an okay job. I'm not going to say any names on that end of the spectrum, but it's like, audiences, I think, can recognize that because there's a layer of that truth. There's less of that, of quote unquote acting going on, and that's usually when you can spot somebody acting, is when they're doing too much, right? And instead of just being the truth of what is happening. So and I'll throw this quote in there now, but it was something that one of my acting teachers used to say, which was, be the truthful expression of exactly what is happening as it's happening, nothing more and nothing less. And there's sort of, he presented like a flip side of this, right, where like Robert Frost is saying like, don't do anything more than the truth, because more than the truth would be too much. Which there's a certain thing that's coming to my mind now that's an important aspect of that quote, which I'll have to try and remember. But this aspect of as well as like nothing less, right? Like you have to like just let the truth be the truth. Like you have to get there, but don't go further than it. Don't go further than the truth, because yeah, like anything more than the truth would be too much, right? Like, it's, what else are you trying to do at that point? You know what I mean? Like that, like, which to me is the question of this whole thing. Like what are you trying to do beyond truth? Like what's more, what is more, can possibly be more valuable, more important than that thing? And for me, I just go, yeah, like that, anything more that we're trying to do is just complete ego.
Okay, so what's coming up for me is the evolution of art. And I studied art history a little bit. And what I appreciate about art history as a study and just as an understanding is how art evolved over time and why it evolved and what kind of went on there. And there was a point where ultra realism was sought after as like, this is what makes a great painting, for example. And then, and I don't know the lineage, so excuse me for those, art history buffs out there who are like, actually, it was this order. I don't know the order, but there, I know some of the terms. So, like surrealism and things like that, where art kind of had realism, but it had an emotional and energetic truth influenced into it, and where the realism almost became boring, and so it wasn't impressive anymore. And I'm sure there's a variation of reasons, but people started to adventure into like almost using realism as a dream. And then, and when you look at art and you see how art evolves, the expression is still truthful. And what kind of brought me to that thought is a film, like as a filmmaker, I remember when I was in my first film art classes and studying and stuff. And I remember I had a teacher who was saying like, realistic is not always what makes a good film. And I remember them saying that like almost day one. And I remember when I was younger thinking like, realism, that's what I'm trying to get. That's what I'm trying to go after. And it took me a few years to really bring that into like my understanding of like what was really meant by that comment. But there's a movie that I just love as a movie because I just find it so impressive as a piece of art, is Wolf on Wall Street, The Wolf on Wall Street. And the reason why I find it so impressive, Martin Scorsese made that movie as a director, as a filmmaker. He brought a vision to it where it has a quality which is larger than life. Mm-hmm. I know that it didn't happen that way. I know that it wasn't really like this, but it probably felt like this. And to me, that seems so truthful. Like it probably felt, because these guys were on drugs all the time and they were living with so much money and so much excess and so much just like for a number of years, which is really short in reality, it probably all seemed like a dream. Like it all just seems so out of this world. And for most of us who have never had that kind of wealth or that type of access, it gives us a chance to enter that world and see how intoxicating it is and wildly destructive, because you're not actually, because these characters are out of touch with reality, but they don't feel like they are. And I love how the movie makes you feel like you're in their world. Yeah. And it seems true and it seems real, although it's not realistic at all in that respect. Like in real life, it wouldn't really be like that. But there is elements of grounded realness in it. And it has a quality that's beyond, it's like beyond life. And I feel like for me as a filmmaker, as an artist, for whatever reason at this point in my career, that's something I'm very interested in exploring as an artist. Whereas I want to take people into a grounded reality and then push them into the feelings and the dreams that of the experience. And so one of the reasons why that movie resonates with me so much is because they took a scenario, a life, and they made it into something that was, just larger than life. And I thought that was so magical and impressive. And yet I still was totally wrapped up in the world. I still bought it. I still went along for the journey. It was a roller coaster ride for me. I didn't agree with it. I'm not going to say that the characters were morally sound or I liked them as people in real life even, right? But like, it's still, I'm like, yeah, you know what? I get it. This is probably what it was like for you guys. This is probably a sense of what this was. And no wonder you got so caught up in it. And no wonder it got so out of control. And no wonder you didn't realize how horrible you were being, because you probably were on you were on a trip, man. You were like on a trip and you were headed for a disaster, a crash. But while you were on it, it was probably sure a lot of fun, And I think there's some part of us all that fast life we're all a little bit excited about. But my point is, let's bring it right back. It's nothing more than the truth. To me, it wasn't realism on point, but it was still truthful. Yeah. And so it's interesting because like, as we're going through this quote, I think that's an important thing to keep in mind, that we're not saying like, yeah, the truth is realism, because that's not what the truth is. The truth is also a feeling. It's also a sense. It's also a bunch of things. It's emotions. It's all sorts of stuff. And art has no bounds in how it will relay those messages. As long as they're truthful it is open for you to do anything. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's something on me too.
Yeah. It is making me think of another quote that I've heard. I don't know who said this, or if I'm saying this exactly right, but it's like, don't let reality get in the way of the truth, or something like that. I can't remember who it was that said something to that effect, but yeah, I think there's a distinction to be made between those things, especially in the realm of art and creative expression, right? It's like the sort of the thing of like real and truth. Well, it's like they're not they're not exactly the same thing, right? Like as you were pointing out, like did some of these things really happen in that exact way? No, but there was something that was more important for the director, and that's where the kind of the creative expression comes in, which is that, look, the truth of this was this, as you're saying, like, was this feeling, was this ride, was this thing that was going on, that was the truth of how wild it is. In order to convey that, sometimes you've got to, he made choice to say, like, we've got to do a little something different with how we're presenting this, because if I just tried to put it out, like put it out exactly for how it happened, it wouldn't translate through the medium, right? It wouldn't come through this thing that I the truth of this thing that I think is more important than all. So I think that there is a distinction to be made there in terms of truth versus reality. And art is always concerned with trying to, at least for me, I was just thinking about this today. I was going for a walk down the beach this morning, and I was thinking about this for me, like this fact that art is so concerned with being able to express the unexpressible, um, that that is trying to deal with something that is um, irreducible, right? Like in terms of, we live very much in a world and a culture which tries to reduce things. Um, with expressions like, "Oh, it's just this," or "It's only that," and it removes some of like the for one, I think it's a very shallow thing to say. It's a very lazy thing to say. Um, it's a dismissive way of just trying to deal with the mysteries and the mystery of what it is to be human, and the fact that we exist. And art is something that tries to find a way to address those things in a way that we go, oh yes, that touches us in a place that's sort of the cold hard facts just can't do it. Like there's a reason why, like take this for example, you're going through a really hard time in your life, right? Do I want to listen to maybe like a neuroscientist, or maybe I'm using the wrong field, right? But a neuroscientist is saying like, well, your feelings of sadness and depression are simply these chemicals reacting with these parts in your brain, and that's just what's happening. Oh, okay, thank you. That's real. Like, is that really help? I don't know. Maybe there's someone who's just like, oh yeah, that's useful to me, but it's like, no. What I need is to listen to a song, or a poem, or I need to watch a movie or something that can express this heartache or something in a way that I just go, oh yes, like that you've said the unsayable of this experience, because that's the thing, is that sort of cold hard fact. Like, as much as, yes, there's I'm not denying that there isn't a truth to it. I'm sure that all of those chemicals and signals are happening. I'm not refuting that. But to say it's only that is I think a great error for us to make in our lives, and I think that we recognize that is an error. Why? Because we still listen to songs and read poetry and stories and all of these things, because it speaks to this experience, where those other things don't speak to the experience. It might be speaking to, yes, a kind of physical reality, but it's not talking to me about the experience, and it's not giving me that comfort, that perspective that I actually need as a human being. And that is where art is, I think, deeply concerned, if not the most concerned. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I feel like I just went down a rabbit hole with that one a bit,
Wow.
but
It's a good rabbit hole. There's something, it reminded me of very, very early on in the podcast. I remember, and I remember you talking about it, but I don't remember in the context. So excuse me if I misquote, but I remember you brought this up, and it was on, he said this, and I'm not quoting you, but you essentially said something along the lines of, my concern is that they don't consider the experience enough. Like everything's about these, and this, but there's this experiential element, which is very important in life and in art and everything. And I really do agree with that. I feel like it's one of those things where you don't always have to understand it. I mean, by all means, go out and try and understand it. Why not? Sure, if you care. But like, you're living and you're experiencing. And like, when I did ayahuasca the first time, I went to another reality outside of this one that was as real as this one is for me. And I recognized that there were probably chemicals going off in my brain, and I'm having a dream that feels real and blah, whatever. But I experienced it as though it was like a real memory, as though it was like something that really happened. And it was fucking incredible and frightening and amazing and all of the things. But it was also larger than life too, in a way, but it was a very, very real and true experience for me. So I think there is an element of experience that we simply just need to acknowledge and honor. And when you're letting the experience I don't know, have its day, I suppose, right? Like, just, I don't know how to put it. Like, you go through the same event as someone else, but you have your own experience of it. That's true. That's real for you. Is it what really happened? Is it the truth? Well, I mean, who knows, right? But it's your truth. It's your real. And I think this is the thing, is like, I think it's good to be able to acknowledge the fact that, like, sometimes when I talk to people about ayahuasca, for example, I've tried to be, everyone's like, when I tell people my story, everyone's like, oh, wow, that sounds so amazing. Listen, you're probably not going to have that experience. Like, it's going to be your own thing. But, and so I'm trying to be careful, because there's this weird retelling of the story, Evan. When I first had my experience, I was like, never again will I ever do ayahuasca. That was fucked. But then I processed, I walked away, and I thought, wow, that was amazing. It is a wonder. It's just amazing. If you went in thinking, oh, I'm going to walk out like Brandon and have this wonder, there's so many variables. I'm just saying, like, the truth has so many variables You know what I mean? And this is the thing. It doesn't matter necessarily if your truth is different than my truth, as long as it's true for you at that moment, at that time. And if it's not true tomorrow, I don't care because it's true today. It's true right now. And that's what matters. And I think this is a thing that of this talk is like I was talking to my class the other day and I was saying, well, one of my life ambitions is to be a millionaire. And today, do I act like a millionaire? Do I behave like a millionaire? Do I do the things that it would take to be a millionaire? And it's like, well, maybe not. And maybe that needs to change. And maybe I need to grow to that. Maybe I need to mature. Maybe I need to evolve. Maybe I need to figure some things out. Maybe I need to be more disciplined, blah, 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 whatever. But what's true for me today is that it's still an ambition. But what's also true to me is maybe I'm not living in accordance to that ambition. And so I can change, I can evolve, I can grow. But if I go and I acknowledge that there's a discrepancy between what I want and where I am, that can help me figure out how to close the gap. And everything is like that. If you don't know how to make a film or you don't know how to write a script, one of the first things I do when I talk to people is I try to go, where are you at now? And where do you want to go? Because I know that today you wouldn't be talking to me if you want my help to write a script because you'd already know how to write a script and you already know how to do it you need to do. So where are you at now? And where do you want to go? And let me try to help you cross the bridge. I can do the same work with myself. If it's between where I am today and being a millionaire, if that's where I truly want to go and I want to stay true to that path and keep going along that line, I simply have to acknowledge the truth of where I'm at and the truth of where I want to go, and then start to figure out what's the bridge that would need to be built between here and there. And I can't be more than what I am right now in this moment. I am what I am, but I can work at being who I think I want to be. I can build towards that, and that will be more true tomorrow as I take another step in that direction. But today I'm here, and today I am who I am, and today I'm not a millionaire, and that is what it is. But if I pretend I'm a millionaire today, I'm deceiving myself, But if I go, you know what, I'm going to commit today to behave what I think like a millionaire would behave like. That's in a way a truthful acting thing because it's true to what I think a millionaire would do. You know what I'm saying? I'm just making up an idea, right? And then that's what acting is in a way. That's what all of this shit is. It's just like, let's just role play it out. When I had this other job, and I have to mention this is really funny because we were talking about this in class and it was such a great moment because we were talking about how we take shit too seriously. And I used this example. I was like, it's like you're playing cops and robbers with your friends and you're like 9 years old. We did this around my block when I was a kid. We played cops and robbers. We had our cap guns and everybody's playing around. But it'd be like if somebody was like, no, man, I'm really a detective. I'm really a cop. It's like, dude, we're just playing cops and robbers. There's a certain point where you have to be like, I'm still playing here. Playing a role of what I think I'm trying to do here. I'm not that. I'm playing at it. The truth is also a bit of a game. It's like, maybe you don't know what a detective is really like, but you're 9 years old and you're playing it out for real with your friends because it's fun. But you don't really know what it's like, but you're playing at it and you're doing it truthfully for you based on what you know. And that's the truth. You know what I mean? And actors, you can get into this whole thing where it's like, I want to know more. I want to know more. I got to do my research. I got to figure every little detail out. Well, good for you, right? But you're still playing at it. You know what I mean? You got to use what you got in a way, nothing more than what you got because it's all you got. I don't know. Maybe you can pair this into something, Evan, but I'm going on a rant, but this is an interesting little line of thought that I've been working through where, just having a little bit of fun with it all, and being this is a big kind of lesson that I've been learning through it all is in the pursuit of something, it doesn't have to be so serious. It can be so what? So what? I'm not there yet. I am where I am. I'm on my way there. Oh, I'm working on it. It doesn't have to be today. It doesn't have to be tomorrow. It might be 3 years from now. It might be 5 years. It might be 10. It might be 20 years from now. but like I'm on my way there, and that's the truth. And one day I might show up there, and then that'll be done, and I'll want something else, and then I'll be on my way there, wherever the hell that is. But I am where I am right now, and that's what the truth is, right? And I feel like that's a big part of this conversation is like you got to start where you're at.
Yeah, and starting where you're at with some, as you're saying, like that, like a kind of lightness, like without, because I think it's that sort of that very serious attitude that is a bit of a blinder, uh because that's usually when someone starts taking something too seriously, it's like it ruins the game for everybody, right? Like it's like suddenly like you're just such a miserable bastard to be around, um when someone just starts taking the game way too seriously. And yeah, it's always got to like, it's interesting. Um I was just listening to the recent episode of Joe Rogan. He had Louis C.K. uh on the show, and Louis was saying how on like the bottom of his sort of like where he writes down his notes in terms of like when he's trying new material and he's working jokes out and stuff like that. He's like at the bottom of every single page, um, he has written down something like, remember it's play, or remember it's fun, right? Like to have fun, because otherwise, what's the point in doing it? And like and he was acknowledging like almost anything that you do in your life that you give yourself to doing, even something that you love, can become it can it still comes with its challenges. It still comes with its hard days, and remembering that, hey, like sometimes you need to just have reminders for yourself to be like, oh yeah, right, this is just fun and play. And I think anybody can see just how, for like a comedian especially, like that's your job is lightness. To a huge degree, your job is to share lightness, not, and as well as shed light on very tough issues, very often, right? Very uncomfortable things, and to be able to say the things that you're not supposed to say, but say them in a way that we can palate it, and we can have a laugh about it, right? And if you're a comedian, you're not, and you're, how can you possibly share lightness if you're taking what you're doing too seriously? It makes you would become ineffective at your role at that point, right?
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I think that for most of us, because it's like, well, like, even if maybe you're doing something that you love, maybe you're not, but given the option of, would you rather be able to do this thing with lightheartedness and with more of a sense of lightheartedness and fun and play, or would you rather it be like a very serious thing that you're showing up to every single time, right? I think most sane human beings would say, I would rather show up with lightheartedness and joy and all of
Mm-hmm.
those things to it. But coming back around to the quote that we have here on with truth, I would argue that place makes it an easier thing to approach. It makes it an easier thing to access. It makes it, because it makes us more open. When we are light and not taking things too seriously, we're actually more receptive, right? We don't have as many walls up. We don't have as many, like we're opened up to life. And when we're more opened up to life and more able to receive, we're better able to recognize, acknowledge the truth of a situation when it happens. At least that's my hypothesis.
Yeah, well, you know, it's like life can be really hard. And I think that when we take life too seriously, these hard moments can become so much harder. And I'm not going to say that it's easy to make this shift, but you know, finding a certain sense of lightness about the moment is an important skill to develop. Like I think you got to be careful with the truth in the sense that you are more in control of it than you realize. And there are certain things about the truth which perception changes it, and you have control over perception. And what I mean by that is that if you're going through like a breakup, for example, you're not the only person who's ever gone through a breakup. And you're not the only person that ever will go through a breakup. And you can look at it and you can say this is the worst. Like I'm in the most terrible position. Or you can be like, I'm in good company. You know, I've joined the human race in heartbreak. I got to experience this in my own way with everybody. And like, if you looked at it as like being included, maybe it would be a little bit different for you in how you interpreted it. Because, yeah, like the events happen, but how you interpret it, how you process it, how you work through it, you know, there's room there, there's art there. And, you know, I would suggest to anybody, because I've gone through a hard time and I've been too serious about it, and I've come out the other side and I look at it and say, like, man, if I walk away from this life and I've had all these experiences that many will never have, I should count myself lucky, even if they're hard. I should count myself like, if I'm going through some type of difficult thing, instead of looking as like, oh man, I'm going through this horrible thing. This is so horrible. It feels horrible, but look at it like, hey man, like you get to experience this in life. And one thing I can tell you about a hard time is if you make it through, man, you're going to come through wise. So don't focus on the hard feeling, focus on the wisdom that you're getting. Like focus on what you're getting, right? Like, and it's an attitude of gratitude. It's the whole like being appreciative. It's all of that stuff, but it's all it's all real, man. It's all like, sound like a hippie. It's all real, man. But seriously, like these moments that you're living, the feeling that you have is real and true for you in this moment, but you're not at the mercy of it. Like in a crazy way, we are all so godlike in that respect, because we can alter the way that we remember things. We can alter the way we see things and perceive things. And that's so godly. It's so incredible that we can take something that's absolutely horrible and find silver linings in these things. And we can find nuggets of gold, and we can find these like truly beautiful things, and we make fucking movies about it, and we write songs about it, and we do paintings about it, and we do all sorts of shit about it. And this is, to me, like, that's so much what art is. I was talking with a friend last night. We were talking about this game, The Sims. I brought this up before, but every once in a while I just crack open this game, The Sims, And I have this, it's like an experiment for me. I play it for a little bit and then I try something out. But he was like, he was really interested in my process with it. And we had a great talk about it. And I said, this one time I was really down in my life. So I opened up The Sims. And what I did was I created this character who was like gloomy because I just felt gloomy all the time. I was like, what the fuck do I do with this? Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you what I found out, Evan. Every time like I went to like write a book or write a screenplay or do something like that, I would utilize the gloomy feeling as the sim and turn it into some type of art piece. And so what I started doing was I started using that in my life. And you know what? I wrote this great script called Love Lust, and it's been probably the best story I've written to date. And it's very emotional. It makes people cry. But it came out of this beautifully deep, heartfelt time in my life. And I turned this very emotional, challenging thing into something that was beautiful. And I just think it's amazing we can do that, And so like I've moved beyond that. I've transcended that stage. It would be very difficult for me to ever write that again, the way that I wrote it. But I had to look at that gloominess because it was the only way I ever processed art like that. So this is the thing, man. I want to be a champion for people. And I just really believe that if we use the truth to benefit us, to serve us, if we're grateful for it, we can come out the other side and really appreciate it, even if it's difficult and hard while we're in it. And you have a big poster or not big painting in your house. This too shall pass. Just always something I remind myself of, this too shall pass, this is the truth now, but not forever. Yeah. And who knows what the truth will be tomorrow, but we're here today. We're doing this podcast at this moment. It is what it is. You know what I mean? Like these little things, and people, they almost like throwaway statements sometimes for people, but like, it really is. It is what it is. We're here now,
Yeah. It's, and so often like we're actually deluded in our sense of understanding the truth of what's going on. Hey everybody, this is Evan, and this episode is brought to you by my book. Yes, I recently released a book called The Actor's Awakening: Connecting Spirituality to Craft. Expand yourself as an actor and your craft through a spiritual perspective. Take a journey that will explore universal philosophies and insights to help you understand human nature in a profound way, and develop practices to take your work to another level. Again, that's The Actor's Awakening: Connecting Spirituality to Craft. Available on Kindle and paperback on Amazon. And as always, if you like the show, please subscribe.
All right, everybody. So this talk, we had a brief little break, and we're back at it. So that rarely happens for us because we like to just go right through, but it's what happened today. And as we were just talking about, it is what it is. So, whatever, like, I think what's interesting about this whole talk is that we're talking about just basically not putting some extra thing on because you somehow feel like this isn't enough as it is. And I think that's like a big part of what we're really talking about here.
Yeah, it's a huge part of what. Yeah, no, I think that
I see you nodding. I wanted to toss it to you, but maybe I did it awkwardly. Mean, that's kind of what we're talking about here. Really, it's like maybe that's where we need to take this conversation, because I feel like we got the basis of what we're doing here, and we opened up to the flexibility of art. But why do we do these little extras? And like, what is going on where we can't accept the truth of the moment as what it is? Like, what's happening?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of it. Oof, man, that's a big thing to bring up at a late stage of of the game here. But let me take a crack at it, because I do feel like this is in many ways something that I work on a lot with actors, especially very early on, is like what are those things that get in the way of us being able to show up fully, presently, as who we are, with what we are. And very often I think there's this thing of, we have all of these things that we want to happen, and we're carrying that around with us in the stuff that we do. So for actors, it's all, I want to, you want to be a great actor, right? And so you have all of these ideas of what that is, and you have all these ideas of what a great actor is. Like, okay, well, great actors, they have emotions. They, like, they get angry, and they cry, and they, they do all of this kind of stuff. And it's like, yes, they certainly, they certainly have access to their emotions, but so a lot of actors, kind of jokingly within the world, they show up just, trying to be angry and trying to cry all the fucking time. And
Yeah.
it's totally, it's a total misunderstanding of what you're doing. So anyhow, actors are showing up with all of this stuff, that before they've even begun to do anything, and and wanting to be interesting, wanting to be funny, wanting to look good, wanting to not wanting to look stupid. Like, there's all of this stuff. And again, for me, like, the big word that I bring up, I say it's the big C word in my classes, but it is control, right? There's all of this control that's based on all of these ideas that you have about what this thing is that you are doing. And in many ways, the first step of the work is just like, well, let's and which is why I love Meisner work so much, and how, I don't know how he figured this out, with this sort of training and these exercises of repetition that he built. I don't know how he figured this out, but I think it's just brilliant. But essentially, he figured out a way how to force people into rapid, spontaneous, real contact with another person, like where you pretty much don't have much choice, it's funny to watch the mind trying to step in and take back over and take control again, and we just kind of keep pushing. It's like, no, like, let's give up control, just react, just respond. And to what you were saying, like, that's usually one of the things that I say to people at the end of at least my very first, my first sort of introduction courses, is at sort of the end of a certain section. I say, one of the most beautiful things for me about this work is that it is the recognition and practice that who we are is enough, right? That you can show up here with another human being and just be in the truth of, and just simple truths, we're not talking about anything crazy or any extraordinary circumstances necessarily, just two people really being with each other and being able to recognize the truth of what's happening between you and this other person.
Mm-hmm.
And how fascinating that is, how interesting that is, how exciting that is to be existing in that level of aliveness, because there is an aliveness that comes with that. And that is 100% enough. That is, and it's more than enough. Yeah. And I think the problem is there's a distrust of that. There's a distrust of it. And again, with actors, and I would encourage everybody who's listening to extend this outside of acting. Like, it's because I think that this does extend well outside this. I think this has a lot to do with human behavior, and how we are as human beings. but that sorry, I was just
You need the radio
just
silence. People are
I
gonna
know, I
think
know.
the
It's like
podcast shut off.
I know. It's like I just I know. I'm like I feel like I've just started setting that up and building it, and then so I'm like let Evan collect his thoughts for a second,
You're so thoughtful,
and he'll
Evan.
get it
You're
together.
so
He'll get it
thoughtful.
together. But that yeah, this extends well outside of acting, but that actors are learning how to just trust that this this thing is enough to carry them. And there was something I wanted to say to this, Brandon, and as per usual, it slips my brain. It usually comes back.
Okay, let me just say
Yeah, yeah,
something while
yeah.
you're thinking about it. I think you're onto something with the whole thing of like we want to look good, we don't want to be embarrassed, we don't, we want to do a good job, all this kind of stuff. I also think that there's this part of us that like we don't think will be accepted as we are because we don't accept ourselves as we are. And I think that has a lot to do with culture and the kind of sometimes the cultural narratives that get pushed through our society is like things about status and about wealth and about like what is beauty and all of this stuff, and then we take that shit on and we run it through some kind of weird filter and I don't live up. But then we feel like we can't just show up to do life as we are because somehow we have to be this thing. And I think it's very in ways we don't see, where in a story did something a certain guy, or that's what it is to be, a desired woman, or whatever it might be that you're factoring through what you're seeing, right? And then you make this judgment call, and then you say, well, I don't live up to that. And it could be on a TikTok app or an Instagram app, it could be thing, right? But it just somehow it comes in this very sneaky way. And now you're trying to be enough, and you're trying to live up to what you think you're supposed to be. And there's all these things that like women, like we run through at various degrees, and we carry so much your issues because everybody around you is kind of like pumping your tires and just making you feel good and helping you feel assured, whereas some other people, they just got people around them that are very vindictive or competitive, and maybe they're tearing you down all the time. And so maybe it's just your friend group, but you don't know because it's so normal to you. And so you're just trying to, you're being tough, and really you're getting beaten down by maybe your family or your friends or your colleagues or whoever else, and you're just toughing it out every day, and you don't realize how much you're toughing it out every day. And so, like, listen, I think I said this earlier in the podcast, so I'll say it again. I'm a champion of people because I've been through the hard fucking time. And I'll tell you this: if you're around that are shit to you, and you need to look at that and go, okay, it's time for me to make a call. Do I need to move away from people? Do I need to do like, because I think the thing is like the truth is so subjective. And if you're taking on it's like gonna be encouraging and positive and whatever, and if you're around something that's like vindictive, destructive, whatever, maybe you need to move away from that, because you might find that you don't have to do a lot of change other than just get out of this environment you're in or whatever. Because the perception, as much as we have the ability to decide and control it, we are influenced by our world that's around us. And so I think part of this talk, which is kind of coming up for me now at this point, is just, yeah, like acknowledge the fact that maybe your environment is altering your perception of reality in a way that might not be for the best. And maybe your environment or social circle needs to change. Maybe the media you consume needs to change. Maybe something needs to change to help you see the world and see yourself, although not changing yourself, just seeing yourself and seeing life differently will help you to live a better life and to live a better truth. Because listen, like, it's that saying, I'll just say one other thing. One person's trash is another's treasure. And you might be walking around with people who treat you like trash and look at you like trash, but to someone else, you might be their treasure. And if you were just around people that treated you like a treasure, you might start to see that you're a treasure, Don't accept people treating you like trash. You're definitely not. I can tell you that for fucking sure. Those people are trash. Anybody who looks at someone like trash is trash, right? And that's one of the things that helps me get away from toxic people. Because I go, that is you. I don't take your gift. I don't take your thing you're putting on me. You're trash. If you see me as something wrong with me, unless you're trying to help me improve, unless you're trying to actually make me better, unless you care about me, love me. I wrote a quote today, Evan. I write something every day. I'll say this one other thing, and I don't know, it's kind of off, but it relates to this, is I wrote, love is looking for you, period. Always, period. So look for love. It's looking for you, look for it. And that love is the truth. At the end of the day, love is the truth. Everything else is bullshit. So anything other than love would be too much.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's like I think that love and truth certainly have they have a connection to each other that would be an interesting thing to maybe explore on another episode.
I agree.
The connection between love and truth. Should write that down.
How's our connection doing? Are we all right on just the technical level?
It's been a little bit spotty, but you know what? You roll with the punches, and we'll sort it out. So for everybody who out there for sticking with us this far, thank you very much, and hopefully we'll have everything ironed out in our next one. But I loved everything you had to say, and I remembered what I was so ineloquently trying to get to beforehand in this whole thing, which is that for so many actors, like this whole thing of just learning to be present and to trust that is enough. It feels like you're doing nothing. And there's a distrust in that. There's this distrust in feeling like, oh, I don't feel like I'm working at this. I don't feel like I'm working hard, right? I don't feel like I am doing this, right? With a capital D, right? I don't feel like I am doing this. Therefore, I must not be doing anything, which means this must be shitty. And that whole distrust creates this overcompensation to deliver more than what is needed, right? To not meet the moment for what it actually is and for what is actually required. So, and I think that, again, that extends, I think, outside of the world of acting. Like, how many of us just don't really trust ourselves to respond to the moment, feel that we have to just do all of these other things in order to be, worthy of this or that, where we don't recognize that there might be just some inherent part of us that, is our greatest gift that we bring with us. The only thing that we have to do is get out of the way for that thing to have its place, to take the stage, right? And very often, I think that is exactly the case that happens, because when we show up with all these ideas of how to do something, we're essentially replacing who we are, our ability to respond, with a bunch of these abstract ideas that we've picked up from this person and that person and this person and that person. It's no wonder why Krishnamurti used to say that most of us are secondhand human beings, right? Because we're all living in these abstractions of who we are and who we think we're supposed to be, and having to put that out there. And then the real us never has an opportunity to show up. never gets that opportunity. And there's another really great quote that I often read to my classes, which is from Eckhart Tolle, or Eckhart Tolle, or however I would just say Tolle. But he it's quite a long quote, but it it ends with the kind of ends with this whole notion of like, look, when you can show up in the now without any sense of this person, like of without past, future, just you, in the sort of the stillness of the now, nothing of value is lost, and that in fact you're more you than you've ever been. Right. And I often say this one in conjunction with another quote from Zen and the Art of Archery, which, this master says to his student, "You think that what you do not do yourself does not happen." And I think it all speaks to this whole thing. Why do we try and show up with more than the truth? Why do we distrust ourselves? Why do we feel like everything has to be, this fucking effort all the time, right? And when it might not be necessary whatsoever. And yeah, it's a fascinating problem, conundrum that I think we have as human beings, is this not enough, and that not enough feeling, I think really truly drives so much of this, more than the truth, right? Living in our ideas of what we think should be, as opposed to what is. And it's like, well, what if what is always enough? What if things don't need to be any different from what they are? I know I'm talking quite a lot, and I'm bringing up a lot of sort of like, I'm bringing up like the greatest hits of some of like my favorite like authors and teachers and stuff like that. But when we did our episode a while back on where we answered the question, like these questions that we always ask our guests, and what's the most important book I ever read? And I said, well, it was the most important book I've ever read was The Laws of Spirit by Dan Millman. And I remember the first time I read it, there was this sentence, statement, whatever in there, but it posed a question of, what if you trusted that you were exactly where you're supposed to be? What if you lived your life, as if you were exactly where you're supposed to be right now? What would that do? How would that change your perspective in life? And I remember feeling deeply impacted by it at that time, because at that time I really didn't feel like I was where I was supposed to be. I had all of these ideas that I was supposed to be, somewhere else doing these other things and whatever. But then it was just like, what if you're exactly where you're supposed to be? And that sort of, even if, whether you believe it or not, but if you just try that on for a second, it's one of those questions that, for me, when I really sit with it, it's kind of like a fog clearing, and suddenly it's, I thought I was kind of trapped in this space, and I discovered that I'm actually in a more wide open space than I thought I was. There's potential, there's possibility, there's a whole world that in front of me that I forgot was there, or didn't realize was there. So, this is it. I might feel like I've been wandering off. I kind of feel like I'm wandering off, but I think that this is all related, and I'm glad that you brought it into the fold, Brand, this whole thing of like, not enough, because I do actually think that that's central, quite central to this quote that we started off with in this podcast.
Yeah. Well, I love what you said, man. I mean, I love that you brought that in here at the end. I really do. This whole idea that like I am exactly where I'm supposed to be right now is it's such a to me that's such an empowering and powerful sentiment to embrace in life. And I mean, it's just like I think as we've done this podcast, you know, because we so much of it has been about like a journey, right? Like way of the artist, like what, you know, finding your way, making your way, claiming your path, you know, all this stuff, right? Um, Embracing it. But it's like if we go back to those initial like first three episodes of like, what are we trying to do here? It's like, yeah, like embrace it, man. You're starting the journey where you're at. It's so awesome where you're gonna wander, where you're gonna go. Like it's great. You don't need to be there yet though. You're here now. You know? Just yeah, go that way for sure. Like that's the way you want to go. But like, you know, it it's you're here now. You know, this is where you're at right now. And the more that you just own that and let that be, the easier a lot of this stuff's gonna become, right? The more of a flow you're gonna just find in the whole thing. So yeah, I mean, and it's the truth, right? You are where you are, and you deal with what you deal with as you are there. So, well, man, I mean, listen, this has been a great talk, and I could talk a lot more. I'm gonna say we wrap this baby
Yeah,
up.
let's do it.
I'm
Let's
gonna
do it.
mention my beer, and you can do the same if you have one. So I'm having another Bowen Island Brewing beer. I did one on the last one. I did one again. This is called the Artisan IPA. Delicious. Blue can. The can isn't delicious. The beer inside of it is. That's what I got for you, Evan. What do you
Nice. I'm drinking one from one of I think the best breweries in BC, Yellow Dog Brewing Company. And this is a special run, kind of I guess almost end of season on this one, but this is called Foxy the Snowman.
got? Nice.
And it's a California Common, which is just kind of like a, you know, it's like an ale. It's like a nice. It's just a nice ale. It's easy to drink, but it's kind of got a nice creaminess to it. I like it, man. Like Yellow Dog, I feel like I don't think I've ever had anything bad from them. So
I agree. Everything they do is really solid. And I really like their cans. I like the look of them. Okay, I'm gonna wrap it up first, and then I'm gonna pass it to you. So, as we've done this conversation, I mean, I'm reminded of a few things. I think is, I'm reminded, you know, that like where I'm at is perfect. It is what it is. Like it is exactly where I'm supposed to be right now, and there's really nothing. It needs to be nothing other than what it is, and I think like there's an idealistic part of me that's like yeah, just yeah, that's it. But it's like there's a realistic part of me. It's like, why are you fighting that? And I think that kind of comes back to my main point in the beginning, to be kind to myself. Is like it is what it is. You are where you are, and like it's okay. It simply is, and you don't need to fight it. You don't need to resist it. If this is what's happening, and like I think of it as, you know, this has come back to the point of, and I think that one of the lessons I'm walking away from, like what is self-love is being okay with where I'm at. That's part of loving me. Because if I was talking to me, an older, wiser version of me, I would say to me right now, Don't worry one bit, man. This is exactly where you're supposed to be right now. This is exactly what's supposed to be happening. This is everything is exactly as it's supposed to be. You don't need to be here where I am today. You're there where you are today. And you know what? One day when you're me and you're looking back at this, you're going to appreciate this moment. So let's just skip that whole rigmarole. Enjoy it today. And then you'll be here and enjoy today when you get here today as well. You know what I mean? And I think that is a good motto for life. You know, you can just keep running that kind of over and over again. And like, look, man, like another thing that, good friends and mentors have reminded me of many times is like, if you want to change and you're literally going to do something about it, like you're not going to just sit on your ass and think about it. You're actually going to take an action. You will change. It's just inevitable. Like, and I work a little bit every day to push myself towards where I want to be. And you know what? It works. And I don't always know how long it's going to take. Sometimes it takes longer than I like, but ultimately I always end up kind of where I want to be, a little closer, at least a step closer. And the challenge, I'll just say one last thing on this whole thing, is really the challenge is the goalpost move, because I do achieve where I wanted to be and what I wanted to get, but then I move the goalpost again and I go, actually, I want to be here. But I have to remember the goalpost was at one point here, and it was one point, you know what I mean? And maybe not everything has been met. Some things are not getting the attention or care they need, but other things are flourishing. And that's okay too, because that's part of life, because it's like attention, right? Where are you putting your attention? Like maybe I'm putting it on career, and then you get something with your career, and then it's like, well, wait a minute, like love, romance, friendship. Oh, okay, put it there, right? And then something's getting maybe neglected a little bit. And so then, it's not that you are at fault for neglecting it necessarily, as much as you just weren't paying attention. You just didn't realize the consequences of neglecting that. And now you do. And so now you make up for it. And that's life, right? And it makes it interesting because it's all a juggling act in a big way too. We're a lot of plates, put it that way. All right, that's what I got, Evan. What do you got?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I'm glad that at the end of this, like, to be reminded of a message that was very powerful to me many years ago, because I feel like I could spend some time with that one again. And the first script I ever wrote on my own, On the Highway, that was the theme, that was the that I was taking on, was like, or was this question of like, what if you're exactly where you're supposed to be, even when you're like, you don't feel that way, you don't think about, like, what if? And I think that it's interesting how that has so much to do with a lot of the things that we've talked about today, and in terms of where we started out, this quote, like, anything more than the truth would be too much, right? And this sort of relationship between these two different ideas, these two different quotes from some pretty marvelous people. Because yeah, I think that most of us we're constantly inundated with ideas and images, and and we have this conditioning and all of this stuff that we're walking around with, of these people that we think that we're supposed to be, these people that we think we should be. And that makes us all a little bit crazy. And this whole sort of, I wrote something down here, after, like, from something you were saying. And I wrote down, in trying to be accepted, we become secondhand human beings. In trying to be accepted, we become secondhand human beings. We so want to be accepted, and that's understandable. And it just ends up kind of polluting the water when that's what we're just trying to do, when so much of the wisdom of the age has been you have to accept yourself. right? Accept yourself and who you are. And then from there, something can happen. Something can emerge from you that is real and is true and is authentic and is able to be without any hangups, without any restrictions. And then the truth of your being gets to live and exist and do true things. And I mean, I think that's a beautiful thing. It's an incredible challenge. It's an incredible challenge. But I think that, yeah, I think that we can get to this place of living and creating with more truth through, I think that it's like we started this podcast with like almost like a goal, right? Of where we want to be as human beings, which is like to just be expressions of truth, right? Nothing more than that. Nothing less than that, right? How do we do that? I think that this thing of maybe recognizing that we're exactly where we're supposed to be and who we're supposed to be right now, I think that sets us down the path towards that thing that I think that we all want. Thank you for listening in on our conversation today. We hope you found something helpful that you can carry forward with you. Head over to our website, wayoftheartist.com, for more free exclusive material and learn about the show. If you haven't already, please support us by subscribing to the show, sharing it with people you know, and keeping compassionate, creative conversation going.